Stepping inside the principal's office, building community where the right synergy. Stepping.
A lot of times this topic comes up with leaders. It's either met with
It's a safe place to be where leaders can be free. Come learn new lessons.
gap is closing.
Feel free to ask a question. Stepping the principal's office. Inside the principal's office.
I mean, are you guys principals or middle school students?
Inside the principal's office.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Inside the Principal's Office, where we endeavor to create a community of leaders and educators. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is McWilliams, but all of my friends call me Mac. I'm an educational consultant, and I have the joy of traveling and partnering with principals and teachers and leaders across the nation. And one of the things that I really love doing is connecting with leaders here in this space. I am only one half of the team, the Inside the Principal Office team, and I am so glad for my co-host, Charles, all the way from Chicago, Illinois area. How's it going, Charles?
It's going great. You know, I'm fortunate the fact that it only took us 15 episodes before you allowed me to call you Mac, so I could be your friend. No, I'm joking. Mac, I love being in this space with you. Thank you so much for being here once again. As Mac said, my name is Charles Williams. I am in the Chicago area where I serve as an assistant principal, as well as I am the host of the Counter Narrative podcast and the founder of CW Consulting. So, you know, we do this work. We do a lot of different things, but this is probably one of our favorite spaces to be because we get to connect, but then we also get to connect with you. And we have some amazing guests with us today. So right below, I have Rabia. She's right here. I had the opportunity to connect with her this past summer. So really looking forward to spending some time with her again in this space. And we have Darnell, who's all the way on the other side of the world. So we're going to kick things off and let them introduce themselves. So Rabia, how about you go first? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you all. My name is Rabia Khokhar. I'm in Toronto. I'm an educator as well as an equity and educational consultant. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm Darnell Fine. I work as a deputy principal in Singapore. I also do a lot of equity work. So mainly my focus has been with international schools around the world and working with them on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives.
Nice. I'm going to have to pull like both of you later on for a whole nother project. But thank you so much for being here.
Most definitely, because Charles is the equity guru, and I think we may have to have both of you on and let's talk about equity. But today we're talking.
That's going to be the two topic. Shift the topic. No, I'm joking. Don't do that.
To those of you who are familiar with our show, you know that we have two discussion questions that we discuss as a panel, and then our favorite part of the show is ideas that stick. We'll move into that. We want to move rapidly into question one. And let's get started today.
Inside the Principal's Office discussion question 1. What are you modeling? What are you giving feedback on? What are your expectations in the classroom? As an instructional leader, what would others say is important to you about what happens in the classroom?
This is an intriguing question. Not what we think, but what do we emphasize in our actions, in our activity? What would people say that we value about the classroom? We're going to go to Toronto first. Rabia, talk to us. What would others say that you value in the classroom?
I think this is such a great question because it helps us like reflect on like what we put out as leaders. And I think for me, it's really interesting because I've had like the privilege and opportunity to play like different like roles or like have different positionalities within the system. So, you know, like I've been a classroom teacher, I've been a school librarian, and now like through my work with like equity and inclusion and consultancy, I get to work with like teachers and school boards. So I feel like it gives me, as well as like a supply teacher within the school board as well. So I feel like these different like opportunities or positionalities that I've had has helped me think about how I like might show up in the space too. And I think what these different roles and experiences have taught me is that I really value the classroom as like a critical space. So I see the classroom as a space that has the potential to really create change. And I see it as a place that's very intentional. So it's not really like a neutral space where, you know, we're just doing things that are in or things that might be cute, or, you know, what I really see it as this intentional space that's curated and that's cultivated based on the identities that are present. They really see the classroom as a place that affirms the identities of the students that are like living within it. Like it's an active, alive space, as well as it's a space that like expands who might not be in the space. So I think if people were to think about like you know, like what maybe what they might reflect on is that I really like emphasize like representation, and not like tokenistic representation, but like representation that happens in the classroom like throughout the year, through the instructional approaches, through how the classroom is set up. So I think if somebody was to reflect on, you know, what they might think of me or my like leadership, I think it would be like me always emphasizing representation and like authentic representation.
I can really see what I can really listen to you and hear your heart, and I really get a sense of what your passion is in education. Darnell, if we ask others what you value in your role, what do you think people would say you value?
I just feel like Robbie and I are kindred spirits, so I think you all were intentional with pairing us up together on this panel because everything you said, Rabia. I like to say that I'm a coach, the responsible school leader. And I like to believe that that comes out in my work with classroom educators, but also at all levels of the school. I'm trying to center minoritized voices and not just for representation, but ultimately treating education as a practice of freedom, in the words of Bell Hooks. So what happens in the classroom, I think there are some things that happen before. Is your curriculum reflective of the students that you're teaching? And then I draw on the words of Emily Style when she says, half of the curriculum walks into the room when the students do. So your curriculum needs to be representative and reflective of the populations of students that you serve. And oftentimes, and if we're talking about positionality, Rabia, it's related to race. And my positionality as a Black leader knows what it feels like when I am not seen in the curriculum. I've grown up in different education systems where I was rendered invisible. So it's important for me that regardless of the content area, whether it's the sciences or math or PE, that students who are minoritized and often pushed to the margins see themselves in the curriculum. For instruction, that's informed by the curriculum, and your instruction also needs to represent the diversity of learning profiles and interests and rich histories of our students when they're in the classroom and you're delivering instruction and you're engaging in inquiry. And then there's also what happens after instruction. It's the assessments. So assessment for learning and of learning, it needs to be project-based, but it needs to also be purposeful. So those project-based assessments moving beyond simply testing students with multiple choice exams and rote memorization to meaningful application of knowledge to novel contexts that's meaningful to students' real lives. I hope that's what people see. or belief.
Excellent. And I think that you hit on something that is something that I focus on, and you hit on that piece of assessment for learning. And I would hope that anyone that would answer this question based on what Mr. Matt values is I honor, or I keep a focus on the learning, that our focus cannot be on the teaching. We know that teaching is an art, and we know that teachers, we hear that teaching is a work of heart, and they pour themselves into their craft. But we really have to make sure that in our rooms, no matter what, we have to make sure that what teachers are doing and what the educators are doing, that the end result is students learning, because it is education that is a vehicle, and it is the access point for better lives. So we have to most definitely assess our kids, not just for the sake of assessment, and not just getting a class average of how kids performed after something was taught, but the focus has to be on the actual learning. If you move on after that unit with 85% of your kids mastering that skill, what are your plans for the 15% that were left behind? My focus is there, ensuring that every child in the building is learning at high levels, making sure that teachers are aware of what is absolutely essential for every kid to know, by grade level, by content area, and really working to assure that everybody is learning, and that there are plans to intervene and also enrich for kids when they have gotten or not gotten an essential standard. Charles, we're ready to hear all this brilliance. I have my pen to take notes of this brilliance. What would people say that you value in the classroom?
This is always one of the challenges of going last, especially with a group like this, because you're like, oh yeah. But I think there's a common theme amongst us, right? And I think that's just an echoing the sentiment of high quality leaders and what we expect in our building. So I think the very first thing, being in our urban areas and working with our populations, and we've talked a lot about this equity work, that a lot of times what happens is when people come into our spaces, they have pity on our students. And it's like, we don't need pity. Like, Hotep from Hustle University talks a lot about that accountability is love, right? We have to hold students accountable, as Mac, you just said, high levels of learning. So I want to see that in your classroom. I don't want to sit in your classroom and see you dumbing down the curriculum. I don't want to see you saying, yeah, you know what, you were close and we'll accept it. Like, no, I need you to hold our students to the same level of accountability as they do in other places, because at the end of the day, our students are going to be operating in that same exact world. And so I don't want excuses. I don't want saviors. I need somebody who's going to come in and see the potential in our students, because it is absolutely there. They have the ability, they have the capacity to hold our students to those levels. And of course, I'm not going to discount the myriad of factors that are going to be obstacles and struggles. They're going to be there, but we're going to help our students through those. And so one, I look for that. Another thing that I look for is just a level of professionalism in our buildings. And I say this because I really struggle when teachers are asking things of their students that they themselves aren't doing, right? Like, you're getting upset because your kid is coming to school late or to your class late, but then that child is like, why should I show up early or on time when I'm sitting at the door waiting for my teacher to show up, right? That's not okay. How can I ask my student to say, hey, you know what, make sure you take your hat off in the building. Make sure you take your hood down while you're in the building when a teacher's wearing a hat. Like, it's those levels of professionalism, because our students cannot be that which they do not see, right? So I need you to demonstrate to our students what they can be. We talk a lot about surrounding our students with like Black male educators as one example, right? Well, if that is what we're going to do, if we're going to get these people into these spaces, then I need you to show up in a way that they can emulate what they're seeing. And so those are my two big ones, right? I need high expectations and academic language performance in the classroom. But then I also need you to demonstrate the type of person that is going to be successful when they're out in the world. Those are the two things. The way I carry myself when I walk into my building, and sometimes the kids are like, Mr. Williams, really? This is who you are all day, every day? Because this is what I need from you, right? Now, the Mr. Williams, maybe on a Saturday night, no, I'm just sleeping on Saturday nights. It's just, those are the things that I expect. And so I would challenge you, right? If you're watching the show right now, if you think this is what I value, take a peer, take a colleague, go into a classroom, sit there for about 10 to 15 minutes, no more, and just record what your observations are and then come out and compare notes. Like, that is going to say a lot about the things that you're actually paying attention to and what you value, because that is what you're being focused on. So just a challenge to you. Like, I know we're all saying it, and I'm sure that we've been engaged in those practices, but I would encourage you as a leader, step in the classroom, bring a colleague, take those notes, switch them, and see what it says about what you value.
That's excellent, Charles.
Did I give your pen a workout? Is that enough?
Yeah, you did. You did.
So, Mac, one of the things that, and for everyone, right? One of the things that we like to do is, we're not just talking heads. We don't just say, hey, this is what, we're just believing these things. We're just saying these things. We're always trying to tie them back to different areas. And so one of the things that we've done, obviously, is from this show, we've decided, let's take these tidbits of information, this knowledge that we have, the experiences that we have, and turn them into a book. And so we have our book, right? So it's a little shameless plug every single episode, and it's absolutely okay because it's our show, it's our book, but we're always trying to tie it back. And one of the things that this next question reminds me of is week 25. And week 25 talks about modeling consistency, and that is exactly our next question. But before we jump in, just make sure that you go out. You can pick up the book right from Amazon. You could order it from there, and it's just full of information broken down into 40 simple weeks for reflection that you can go through. So let's talk about some consistency with question number 2, just like week 25.
Inside the principal's office, discussion question 2. As leaders, it's important that we ensure a level of consistency while at the same time trusting teachers to exercise their professional judgment. How do you find the appropriate balance between uniformity and consistency versus discretion among your teachers when it comes to curriculum and instructional practices?
This is a great question. What you permit, you promote, and I cannot wait to hear the responses here. I know this is one of the questions I get from candidates when I'm interviewing them. How do you set things up for your teachers? So I cannot wait to see your responses. So Rabia, you went first last time. So Darnell, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, consistency itself or uniformity itself is hollow if you're not looking at what values that you want to make consistent. And like I hear the do for questions and what you're looking for in teachers and what we want students to learn and how will we know it and how will we enrich and how will we extend. And those things are important in maintaining consistency. But we also need to ensure that there's a foundation of values that we all agree with, that we want to build consistency, a shared commitment, and continuity to. So consistency in itself is not enough. So I'm going to go back to coach the responsive teaching. Like, I want consistency in kids seeing themselves in the curriculum. I think there are many vehicles to get there. Like, I think curriculum and instructional practices can be catered to the students who are in the room. We have lots of different vehicles to get to the final destination. So I think that's where we can see some variance. And that, I guess those instructional strategies and curricular strategies, when they have variance, it shouldn't just be dependent on the teacher's preference and what the teacher is interested in. You should be polling and keeping an interest journal of what your students enjoy and what your students bring to the classroom. And that should drive the variance in your responsiveness in the curriculum. And that's where you should be a bit more divergent in your thinking as a teacher. But in regards to consistency, what I expect, understanding by design. I expect that there's some clear consistency of desired results connected to assessment practices, high quality assessment practices connected to inquiry-based learning opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. Rabia, what about you?
I really love what you've said, Darnell. I think it's like a whole like school approach. Like it's not just like one aspect, and it's something that we constantly are doing. I really love your like idea of like this interest journal. I think that's being so responsive, and I think it's also like taking that like initiative to really get to know your students, and not just like at the beginning of the year where we give out those like interest surveys, but like it's kind of like this thing that we are constantly in a relationship and community with our students. I really like love that idea. I think I would share my idea in relation to this. I think, you know, in the schools that I've worked in, having like a school wide specific goal helps because, and that can come from like a strategic plan. Like we have those like in Toronto schools where like, you know, folks have come together and like different stakeholders have come together and they've kind of put together what the focus will be and what the plans or the goals will be. I think, you know, as I reflect, I think that's really helpful because I think educators are going to like deliver curriculum in various ways. We don't want everyone to do like the same thing. We want there to be differentiation and change because it's going to be responsive to the age group as well as the students that are in the classroom. So we don't want everything to be like a copy in like different grades or different classrooms, but we want consistency in like the messaging or the goals that we're each working on. So if we have like school wide specific goals that are created by like different stakeholders, whether that's like the principal, community, and whether those are like equity or diversity goals or something, if we have like a focus area, then there's consistency in like the messaging of like what we what our school is about, what we're going to be focused on and what we're going to deliver. But there's going to be like differences in how that's delivered based on student ages, student interests. So I feel like there will be consistency at like a structural level, but based on the different schools and I mean different classrooms and different students, there will be more like flexibility. And I think that helps us not like micromanage because we have these specific expectations that have been created with community. And now like there is this like school wide expectation that they need to be delivered in different ways and they're going to look differently. So I feel like that also helps us like set a specific tone. And I think it helps and it shows like what we're about. So it's like if educators maybe are not aligned with that, then you know people need to be aligned to those core values and goals that are kind of like non-negotiable in a way because they've been created with community. So I feel like that's something I would offer.
Thank you. I love the fact that it's almost like you guys took Mac's master class, right? Of the vision, values, mission, right? The goals, those collective commitments. And that's a wonderful place, I think, to found yourself, right? Because if you don't know where you stand, right, then you're not going to know in which direction you're going. And so I think, you know, to give me that little gap that you guys have left me to build off of, you know, one of the things that we used to do when teachers would ask me kind of about my approach to leading, and, you know, I prided myself on allowing teachers to have that autonomy. Right. And so it's nice to be able to say, hey, we know where we're going, but I'm going to step back and give you the autonomy in order to get there. Right. But at the end of the day, the whole point of the work that we're doing is making sure that students are learning, that they are learning at high levels, like we talked about before. And so when we talk about finding that balance between the two of saying, hey, you have the autonomy to pursue those skills, those standards in a way that works for you and your students in your classroom. But at the end of the day, if you're not meeting those, if you're not getting there, if your students aren't moving, right, then we need to step in and we need to take some of that accountability or the autonomy away, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit on the ideas that stick on how you provide feedback. But in one of those areas, you know, I try to keep things as concrete as possible. So years ago, we created just some instructional norms. Like here are 10 things that we expect to see in every single classroom. Like, how you approach things, that's up to you. Some of those, but here are 10 things that I must see, regardless of the classroom that I'm coming in, regardless of the content that you're teaching. These are the things that are going to make sure that we are grounded on our mission, vision, values, and goals. And so I think that's important as an educator, and maybe you're or a leader. I think if you're in that space like I was, like I pride myself on autonomy, but you got to be careful because that can very easily slide into that laissez-faire, right? Like, I'm just going to go, just do whatever you want. But you need to hold people accountable, like I mentioned in the last thing, in the last question. So if your teachers are not performing, if students are not learning, right, you have to step in and say, things need to change, right? We need to tighten in the reins a little bit until they figure that out, right? But that is what we do as an instructional leaders. That's the whole topic that we're talking about, is how do we help our teachers get to a point where now it's like, we're back on track. Now you're good to go again, right? It's not intended to come back in and say, now I'm going to hold your hand for the rest of the time you're in my building. I just need to help get you back on track. And once you figure it out, then we can go again. But you can never just let that go and say, well, I'll check in at the end of the year and hope for the best. Mac, I know I told you it's really tough going last, but I am sure that you're going to deliver us some hot and fresh and some crunchy Mac nuggets.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that's exactly where you were going. I say that it's all cultural. And I believe this when it comes to balancing autonomy, accountability, flexibility. I think that we have to build culture in our schools, and that as a team, teachers, instructional coaches, I think that we have to answer the question, what do we want our kids to learn? Let's get really clear on what kids need to learn. And I think exactly what you said instructional norms. I say that we have to be very clear on what is essential, and we have a culture that is tight and loose. The learning and what kids have to learn is very tight. This is what they're going to learn, and then how you get there is loose. You have the autonomy to present these standards, to convey and to teach these concepts. You use your nuances and what you do to do that. And I think the key is that when we talk about assessment, that we look at assessment and we use that assessment to do two things. We look at student assessments to see what kids got it and what kids did not get it. But then we also look at it and we look for patterns to decide who got the best results. And when we see who got the best results, now let's examine what were the instructional practices and what nuances that you have in your classroom that may be different to others, so that we can then begin to learn from each other and begin to repeat those things. We have autonomy, but we want to make sure that we're executing best practices every single day. So that's an opportunity for teachers to learn from each other. This was the skill that was taught, and my kids scored 12% below your kids. I need to talk to you to identify what is it that you did in your classroom, so that I can go back with my kids when I reteach, so I can use some of those same strategies. So it's an atmosphere of tight and loose. It's using data to identify who got it and who didn't, and to also identify what are the best practices to teach that. That's my 2 cents.
For a moment there, Mac, my brain was like, when you're like tight and loose, and I was like, Lizzo, blame it on the goop. No,
I'll have to go and I'll Google that after the show.
we're throwing it out because maybe she'll jump on the show or sponsor us or something. Who knows?
Maybe. We shall see. Let's move on to our favorite part. This is my favorite part of our show, and it is the portion of the show that is entitled Ideas That Stick. What is one tip you can share about giving effective feedback to teachers regarding their instructional practices? And I think that I've already kind of shared what my one tip would be, and that is creating a culture that values feedback. As educational consultants, as educational leaders, principals, assistant principals, deans of students, instructional coaches, teachers cannot wait to get feedback about their practice from that small group of people in a classroom or in a school. You cannot wait because there may be 36 teachers on a staff and one principal and one AP. So it becomes very important that there is a culture that values feedback. So teachers are getting feedback from a variety of people. I was in a school this week, and one of the neatest things that someone shared with me was they have QR codes outside of classrooms. So anybody that goes in that classroom can grab that QR code and can leave feedback. So how powerful is that? Is that there are teachers from the building going in, snapping that QR code and giving you real-time feedback of what they saw while they were in your class. At the campus, I stepped away from being a principal after being a principal for 20 years. And one of the things that we did at that campus was each teacher had their goal, what they were working on their door. And they asked people to view them and view their class when they come into their classroom based upon what it is they were trying to improve. So create a culture where feedback comes from a variety of sources.
Nice.
Rabia, what would be your idea that sticks?
I would say for educators to really be aware of their identities and the different intersectionalities of their identities and how it informs the choices they make and how they teach. So I think critical and ongoing self-reflection is important.
Thank you.
Very good, Darnell.
Yeah, I want to add on to both of you all. I think leaders need to model that critical self-reflection.
Yes.
And how cool would it be if leaders also had their goals on their doors, and they were also deprivatizing their practice and making public what they're working on. Right. So yes, like Rabia, that critical reflection of identity is so incredibly important. And our leaders need to model that same critical reflection of their positionality and who they are. Like we can't teach what we don't know, but we also can't lead where we won't go, in the words of Malcolm X. So it's important that we also develop at the leadership level, even the superintendent and the district leaders, that they are also open to feedback and adjusting their practice. So learning happens at even the highest levels of schools, and that we're all a professional learning community.
Yeah. A QR code is going on my door tonight. Well, when I get back to the building. Monday. Yeah, I was like, no, too late for that. But Monday. So you know what? One of my things. So I had 3 little points here, and it just, when I think about providing feedback to teachers, I just sat through 2 days of training on evaluating teachers and providing feedback. I tried to tell the district, I've been doing this for 10 years, and they're like, yeah, but you're new to the district. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it all over again. But these are the 3 things that I try to do all the time. Is the first one is being specific. There's nothing worse than just you should increase student test scores. I know that, but how, right? So be specific, give very specific feedback on an area that that they can pinpoint, but also making sure that area is a high impact area, right? There's a lot of things that could be happening in a classroom, but if that thing that you're giving feedback on and saying, hey, I think that this is an area of improvement, that's the word I was looking for, making sure that it has high impact, that it ties into other areas. Because if it's kind of a standalone, it doesn't really connect to anything else. Ask yourself, is that really where we want our teachers managing most of their time, where we really want them dedicating their time and energy and effort? We want that thing to be high impact. And then the last part is making sure that it's able to be supportive. So if I'm going to tell you, hey, my suggestion for you is to do X because that's also going to affect Y and Z, here's some resources for that. Here's some, opportunities that we have for professional development. Here's how I could come in and support you. So that way now the teacher's not sitting there with something and saying, okay, well, how do I do this? So those are my 3 things, making sure that it's very specific, that it's going to be high impact and affect different areas of their instructional practice, and that they could actually have resources so they can move forward with it and not be lost.
I have grown dendrites with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for this conversation tonight. I can't believe that we are here at the end of another episode 31, maybe, of Inside the Principal's Office. We want to thank you, Darnell, for getting up early and being with us. Thank you, Rabia, for being with us late where you are. Charles, it's always a pleasure being in your presence.
Mac, thank you. And, this has been a tremendous conversation. I know one of the things that we talk about, even within the book, we talk about being the lead learner. And so this is one of those ways when people ask, like, how do you practice that? How do you learn? And I said, I get to spend twice a month, in this space with other amazing educators. And it's not just about us. It is the community that we are building. And so that includes all of you. So if you are watching this, please make sure that you are joining the community. We have our whole Facebook page or Facebook group, the Inside the Principal's Office. And so that's a great space. When Mac and I and Wallace, when we started launching this, the idea behind it was, where can we create a space, a safe space for educational leaders to come together, to learn, to grow, and then lead together. And so that is exactly what we're trying to do. So I want to say thank you to our guests for allowing me to learn and to grow. And so that way I can go and become a better leader. So thank you to each of you, Darnell and Rabia.
Our next show is going to be soon, and the October 1st. And the topic is design thinking, developing creative solutions for today's problems. And one of the things that we ask our guests to do is kind of pay it forward. If you were to tune in and watch the show with that topic, what is something that you would want to ask the panel that we're going to assemble? We're going to go first to Rabia, and Darnell, we would love to hear your inquiry.
That's a really great topic and question. I guess I would say, like, what are the problems that we're trying to, like, discuss, and who is, like, choosing those problems, and are they, like, relevant and responsive to the different communities that we might be serving? So I guess in terms of, like, selecting problems, is it, like, with students, and are they relevant and responsive?
Very good.
Yeah, I just want to go kind of back and consolidate, as well as, like, help with the transition to design thinking. Like Rabia said something earlier that was akin to, nothing is devoid of culture and of politics, and everything's influenced by these different systems. And I hope it became clear in this conversation that, like, equity is a core responsibility of educational leaders in all that we do. So when we think of design thinking, it's not a culturally neutral process. Like, when we talk about empathizing with communities, we have to deeply understand who they are, but also reflecting your own positionality as a potential designer. So yes, like, those problems need to not come from a savior mentality. It needs to come from being in partnership with those who you're creating systems and designing for. So design thinking isn't this neutral thing that stands in a vacuum or sits in a vacuum. It's influenced by equity. It's influenced by people, and people design systems. So we have to, when engaging in design thinking as leaders, be aware of who we are, but who we're serving in that design thinking process.
That is wonderful. And I'm just thinking about a conversation that I just had, the shift from, like, allyship to partnership. And so, like, so many things, like, I think I'm going to be reaching out to you guys soon. But I just, again, we cannot say thank you enough to our guests, to those of you who are watching the show, whether you are watching, a week from now, whether you're watching as it airs, whatever it may be, just thank you so much for your support and for keeping this space going. And most importantly, thank you to Wallace backstage, who is never on stage with us, but he makes sure that all of this is operating. And of course, Mac, thank you for being such a wonderful thought partner.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So we will see all of you again on October 1st.
October 1st. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Hi, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching and learning with us at SchoolRubric with educators from across the globe. For more access to articles, magazines, podcasts, live episodes, our international school directory, courses, and more, visit us at schoolrubric.org. Thank you.